The beginning of broken time. What if everything you believe about time is wrong? Not slightly mistaken, but fundamentally broken. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that time is not a straight line, not a constant flow, but something fragile, something that bends, stretches, and fractures across the universe without anyone truly noticing. Because from where you stand, everything still feels normal. Everything still moves forward, second by second, breath by breath. And for most beings in existence, that illusion is enough. But not for Kael Varyn. Because far beyond his world, beyond the reach of any sky he has ever known, there are places where time does not behave the same way. Places where the very concept of past, present, and future has been torn apart and rewritten into something unrecognizable. 3 planets bound to the same system, yet each one drifting through time at a different rhythm. One racing forward faster than comprehension, another trapped in a distant past that refuses to move on, and a third barely moving at all, as if time itself has almost given up on it. Kael does not yet understand this. Not fully, not consciously, but something within him has always felt it, a quiet discomfort, a sense that reality is not as stable as it should be, as if the universe itself is slightly out of sync, like a rhythm that almost makes sense but never quite aligns. On one of these worlds, time flows faster than anything most could comprehend. Civilizations rise and fall in what would seem like moments. Entire histories unfolding in the blink of an eye. Progress accelerating so quickly that nothing remains the same for long. Knowledge builds upon knowledge at an uncontrollable pace. And existence itself feels like a race against its own future. On another planet, time moves in a way that feels almost familiar, but not quite. Slower, heavier, as if every moment carries more weight than it should. Generations grow with the illusion of stability, believing their world is the center of reality, unaware that beyond their skies, other worlds are racing ahead or standing nearly still. And then there is the third world, the most unsettling of them all, a place where time barely moves, where existence stretches endlessly, where change is so slow it becomes almost imperceptible, where a single lifetime feels like an eternity, and evolution itself seems trapped in a loop. For countless ages, these 3 worlds existed in this impossible balance, never truly colliding, never fully understanding one another, each one isolated not by space, but by the rhythm of its own reality. And somehow, against all logic, this fragile system held together. But balance like this is never permanent. Because the moment someone begins to question it, everything begins to break. And somewhere, deep within the fabric of existence, Kael Varyn is about to become the only one who will notice. Because time, once understood, is no longer something you simply live through. It becomes something you can break. The 3 worlds. Now imagine trying to understand a universe where 3 worlds exist side by side, yet might as well be separated by entire eternities. Because the truth is, they do not just live in different places, they live in different speeds of existence. And that changes everything, not just how they evolve, but how they think, how they see reality, and how they define what it even means to live. And for Kael Varyn, this truth is not something he has learned yet, but something he has always felt, like a distant echo inside his mind, something that doesn't belong to the reality he knows. On the world of Valkyris, where time races forward at an unimaginable pace, existence feels like an endless acceleration. Civilizations do not grow. They explode into being, rising, evolving, and collapsing within spans so short they would seem impossible to comprehend from any other perspective. Knowledge stacks upon itself faster than it can be preserved. Innovation becomes instinct, and adaptation is no longer a choice, but a necessity. Here, the past is almost irrelevant because it disappears too quickly, and the future arrives before anyone has time to prepare for it. A world that does not wait, a world that cannot slow down, a world that would never even notice something like Kael Varyn, unless something went wrong. On the world of Arinthia, where Kael Varyn lives, time flows in a way that feels natural, balanced, stable enough to create the illusion of understanding. Civilizations build themselves with care, with meaning, with tradition. History matters, stories are preserved, identities are shaped over generations. And Kael grew up believing that this was how the universe worked, that time moved forward in a single direction. Predictable, reliable, real. But even here, something has always felt slightly out of place, like a memory he cannot reach, like a truth that exists just beyond his awareness. And then there is the los, the slow world, where time barely moves, where existence stretches endlessly, where change is so slow it becomes almost invisible, where a single lifetime feels like an eternity and evolution itself seems trapped, unable to move forward, unable to escape, a world suspended between moments, where urgency does not exist, where nothing ever truly feels immediate, and yet, beneath that stillness, something lingers, something deeply unnatural, as if time itself is not flowing but fading. These three worlds, Valkyris, Arinthia, and the Los, were never meant to understand one another, because understanding requires a shared reality, and they do not share that, not even close. What one world experiences as a lifetime, another sees as a fleeting instant. What one considers ancient history, another has not even lived yet. They exist together, but never truly at the same time. For ages, this separation protected them, kept them isolated, prevented conflict, because you cannot fight what you cannot perceive, you cannot fear what you cannot understand. And Kael Varyn lived his entire life inside that illusion, believing in a stable universe, a consistent reality, a world that made sense. But that illusion is already beginning to fracture. Because the moment one world begins to reach beyond its own perception, the moment it starts to see the others not as distant stars but as reachable realities, the balance begins to collapse. And the most dangerous world is not the one that stands still. It is the one that moves too fast to wait. Because on Valkyris, someone has already started looking beyond time itself. And soon, Kael Varyn will feel it, before anyone else does. The discovery. It doesn't begin with war, or fear, or even ambition. It begins with something far more dangerous, something that has shaped the fate of entire civilizations across the universe. It begins with curiosity, a simple question that should have remained unanswered, a quiet doubt that something about reality is not quite right. And on Valkyris, where time moves faster than thought itself, that doubt does not stay quiet for long. Because in a world where knowledge evolves endlessly, where every answer leads to 10 more questions, there are always those who look deeper, those who refuse to accept reality as something fixed, something untouchable. And among them, there is one mind that stands apart, not louder, not more visible, but sharper, more precise, more patient. Ethan Karyl. While others see progress, he sees inconsistency. While others celebrate advancement, he studies the flaws beneath it, patterns that do not align, events that repeat with slight variations, outcomes that shift in ways that should not be possible. And unlike the others, he does not ignore these anomalies. He isolates them, observes them, dissects them with a level of focus that borders on obsession. At first, the signs are subtle, buried beneath the overwhelming speed of Valkyris. Moments that feel out of place, data that contradicts itself, fragments of reality that do not fully connect, and most would dismiss this as error, as noise in a system too complex to fully understand. But Ethan Karyl does not believe in error. He believes in cause, and if something exists, it can be understood. As experiments begin, the impossible slowly becomes undeniable. Time is not behaving as it should. It is not constant, not stable. It shifts, bends, reacts, as if it is being influenced from somewhere beyond perception. And what begins as observation becomes something far more dangerous. Understanding. Because once something is understood, it can be changed. And that realization changes everything. Because while the rest of Valkyris sees this as the greatest breakthrough in their existence, as the key to limitless progress, Ethan Karyl sees something else entirely. Something far more profound, far more powerful. Control. He begins carefully, testing the limits, small distortions, slight alterations, moments stretched and compressed, cause and effect manipulated in controlled environments. And each time, the results confirm what he already suspects. Time is not a law. It is a structure, and structures can be broken. Far away, on Arinthia, Kael Varyn feels it before he understands it, a subtle shift, a moment that feels wrong, like something has changed without leaving a trace, a memory that almost exists but slips away the moment he tries to grasp it, and he cannot explain it, cannot define it, but something inside him knows. This is not normal. And as Ethan Carwilel continues his experiments, pushing further, going deeper, crossing boundaries no one else even realizes exist, the distance between the three worlds begins to shrink, not physically, but temporally, as if the walls that kept them separate are slowly dissolving. Because the moment time is no longer stable, everything connected to it begins to collapse. And without realizing it, Kael Varyn and Ethan Carwilel are already on the same path, moving toward the same inevitable moment. One seeking to understand what is happening, the other already learning how to control it. The rise of the destroyer. And from that moment, from that quiet, irreversible realization that time is not absolute, not sacred, something begins to shift, not in the stars, not in the planets, but within a single mind, because there are discoveries that expand knowledge, and there are discoveries that redefine existence itself. And Ethan Carwilel has just crossed that line. At first, nothing about him seems different. He does not rise as a leader, does not declare himself above others, does not demand attention, because he does not need to, while the rest of Valkyria celebrates progress, lost in the endless acceleration of their own evolution. Ethan moves in silence, watching, calculating, understanding reality in a way no one else has even begun to perceive. To them, time is a tool now, something to explore, something to experiment with, a new frontier possibility. But to Ethan Carwilel, time is no longer a phenomenon. It is a flaw. And once that idea takes root, it does not fade. It deepens, it grows, it reshapes everything he sees, because the more he observes the structure of time, the more he begins to notice its contradictions. Three worlds, Valkyris, Orinthia, and the Los, each one moving at a different rhythm, each one existing in a different version of reality, overlapping yet never truly aligned, histories that cannot coexist logically, outcomes that contradict each other across timelines. To most, this is complexity. To him, this is inefficiency, a fracture in the design of existence. And fractures are not meant to remain. They are meant to be corrected. Slowly, his perspective evolves into something far more dangerous than ambition, because ambition seeks power within a system, but Ethan Carwilel is no longer interested in power inside reality. He is beginning to see himself as something beyond it, a mind capable of redefining it. His experiments change, becoming less about testing limits and more about reshaping structure. He stops focusing on moments and begins to manipulate sequences, chains of cause and effect bending under his influence. Timelines no longer treated as fixed paths, but as variables, as pieces that can be removed, adjusted, rewritten. And with every successful alteration, something inside him solidifies. A belief, a certainty, that the universe, as it exists, is wrong, and that he is the one who can fix it. Far away, on Orinthia, Kael Varyn cannot see any of this, cannot understand it, cannot even begin to imagine what is unfolding, but he feels it, a tension that did not exist before, a subtle distortion in the rhythm of reality, like something invisible is pressing against the fabric of existence itself, stretching it, testing it, preparing it to break. But on Valkyris, the breaking point has already been reached, because Ethan Carwilel is no longer observing reality. He is choosing it, and in that choice, a vision emerges, clear, absolute, undeniable, a single timeline, one continuous flow of existence, free of contradiction, free of fragmentation, free of the chaos created by multiple realities existing at once. A perfect universe. But perfection does not tolerate alternatives. And that is when the final transformation happens, not in his power, but in his purpose. Because Ethan Carwilel no longer asks what can be changed. He decides what deserves to exist, and everything else will simply be removed. Not violently, not visibly, but completely, as if it was never there at all. And somewhere, across the silent distance between worlds, without knowing why. Kael Varyn feels the first fracture forming inside reality, before anyone else even realizes that existence itself is about to be rewritten. The first erasure. At first, nothing seems different. Nothing breaks, nothing calls attention to itself, because the most dangerous changes in reality are not the ones you can see. They are the ones you almost notice, like something slipping away just before you can understand it. And somewhere deep within the structure of the universe, the first erasure happens, not with destruction, not with chaos, but with silence. One moment something exists, and the next it doesn't, not destroyed, not hidden, simply removed, as if it had never been there at all. And that is what makes it so terrifying, because when something is destroyed, it leaves behind evidence, but when something is erased, there is nothing. No trace, no memory, no sign that anything has changed. And yet, something feels wrong. On Arenthia, Kael Varyn is the first to feel it, not as a clear memory, not as something he can explain, but as a strange hesitation, like a thought that disappears before it fully forms. He pauses without knowing why, as if something important just slipped out of reach, and for a brief moment, the world feels incomplete, like a piece is missing. But he cannot say what it is. And just as quickly as it happens, everything returns to normal. The feeling fades, the world stabilizes, and reality continues as if nothing ever happened. But deep inside, something doesn't sit right. Far away on Valkyris, Ethan Kryll watches the result with complete focus. He doesn't react. He doesn't hesitate because to him, this is not loss. This is proof. The experiment worked. The timeline adjusted, and reality corrected itself perfectly. No instability, no resistance, and most importantly, no awareness. No one noticed, and no one remembered. And that is when everything changes for him, because now he knows this is not just possible, it is controllable. He studies the effect carefully, observing how reality adapts, how everything rearranges itself to stay consistent, how every connection rewrites itself to remove any contradiction. And what he realizes is something far more powerful than he expected. Reality does not fight back. It accepts the change as if it was always meant to happen. So he does it again. Another erasure, then another, each one more precise, each one more controlled. Entire events disappear, then entire histories, then entire worlds, removed completely without leaving anything behind. And still, no one notices, because every time something is erased, reality adjusts instantly, rewriting memory, rewriting logic, rewriting existence itself to keep everything feeling normal. Except for Kael Varyn, because while everyone else forgets, he doesn't. At first, it's just fragments, small flashes of something that doesn't belong, a face he can't recognize, a place he feels like he's seen before but can't find anywhere. And every time he tries to focus on it, it fades away like a dream disappearing the moment you wake up. But the more it happens, the harder it becomes to ignore, because the fragments start to connect, they start to feel real. And slowly, he begins to realize something is very wrong. These are not random thoughts. They are memories. Memories of things that no longer exist. And with each new erasure, they become stronger, more frequent, more impossible to deny. Entire moments, entire lives begin to take shape in his mind, things that feel real, complete, lived. But when he looks for proof, there is nothing. No record, no trace, no one else who remembers. And that is when the fear sets in. Because if he is remembering things that were erased, then that means something out there is rewriting reality itself. And he's the only one who can see it. While far away, Ethan Kryll continues refining his control, not as a destroyer, but as something far more precise. An architect, shaping reality into what he believes it should be, removing what doesn't belong, creating a single perfect timeline, one without contradictions, one without chaos. And with every timeline that disappears, Kael Varyn becomes more alone, because if this continues, if nothing stops it, then one day, there will be nothing left to remember. And when that happens, there will be no proof that anything was ever different at all. The one who remembers. At first, Kael Varyn tries to ignore it, because it is easier to believe that the problem is in his mind than to accept that reality itself might be changing. He tells himself that memories can fail, that thoughts can get confused, that the strange feeling he carries is nothing more than something personal, something small, something that will pass, but it doesn't pass. It grows stronger, more present, more difficult to ignore, because the fragments keep returning, and each time they come back, they feel clearer, more complete, less like imagination and more like something real. He starts noticing patterns, not in the world, but inside his own thoughts. Moments that don't belong to his life. Places he has never been, but somehow recognizes. Conversations that feel familiar, even though they never happened. And at first, he questions himself, because how could any of that be real? How could he remember things that have no place in his world, no origin, no explanation? But the more he tries to dismiss it, the more it repeats, and the more it repeats, the harder it becomes to deny. The memories begin to connect. What were once just flashes start to form sequences. What felt like random images start to make sense. Entire moments begin to unfold inside his mind with a clarity that cannot be ignored. He remembers events that never happened. He remembers people that do not exist. He remembers versions of reality that are not there anymore. And slowly, realization begins to take shape. These are not mistakes. They're not dreams. They are not imagination. They are something else. Something that was real. Something that existed and was taken away. That is when everything changes for him, because now he is no longer confused, he is aware. And awareness is heavier than doubt, because once you understand that something is wrong, you cannot go back to not knowing. And the more he understands, the more isolated he becomes, because no one else sees it, no one else feels it, no one else remembers. He tries to talk about it, at first carefully, trying to explain the feeling, the inconsistencies, the strange sense that something is missing, but people don't understand. How could they? Everything around them is normal, stable, complete. There are no gaps, no signs, no evidence of anything changing. So, to them, Kael Varyn is not discovering something. He is imagining something. And the more he insists, the more distant he becomes from everyone else. But the memories don't stop. They grow. They become heavier, more detailed, more impossible to ignore. Entire lives begin to exist inside his mind, lives that never happened in this reality, but feel just as real as the one he is living now. And with every new fragment, he begins to understand something even more disturbing. He is not remembering one lost timeline. He is remembering many, different versions of the same world, different outcomes, different histories, all erased, all replaced, all gone, except for what remains inside him. And that is when fear truly sets in, not fear of the unknown, but fear of what is already happening. Because if he can remember what was erased, then that means something out there is doing the erasing. And that means it is still happening. Somewhere far away, Ethan Carwilel continues his work, refining each erasure, making them cleaner, faster, more precise. Reality bends without resistance. Timelines disappear without leaving a trace. And the system becomes more stable, more controlled, more aligned with his vision. But there is one detail that does not fit, one inconsistency that should not exist. Kael Varyn. Because while reality adjusts, while memory rewrites itself, while existence reshapes to maintain order, he remains unchanged. He continues to remember. He continues to see what no longer exists. And that makes him something dangerous, not because of what he can do, but because of what he knows. Because knowledge is the only thing that cannot be fully erased. And if Kael Varyn continues to remember, then sooner or later, he will understand everything. And the moment he does, he will become the one thing Ethan Carwilel cannot allow to exist. The burden of truth. At first, no one notices anything. Not clearly. Not the way Kael Varyn does. Not with memories. Not with certainty. But something begins to shift in a different way. Something subtle. Something collective. Like a feeling that moves quietly between people. A hesitation in conversations. A brief confusion that disappears before it can be questioned. Moments where something feels incomplete, but no one can explain why. And most ignore it, because it is easier to move forward than to stop and question reality itself. But the feeling doesn't disappear. It spreads, slowly at first, almost unnoticeable, like a faint signal buried beneath everything else. People begin to experience small inconsistencies, not enough to prove anything, not enough to confirm that something is wrong, but enough to create doubt. A thought that doesn't connect, a memory that feels slightly off, a sense that something important has been forgotten, but no one knows what it is. And that is where it begins. Not with awareness, but with doubt. Kael Varyn sees it happening. He notices the change in others, the way they hesitate, the way they almost question something before letting it go. And for the first time, he is not completely alone, not because they understand, but because they feel something. And that feeling is enough to open a crack in the illusion. So he tries again. He speaks more directly now, less careful, less afraid of how it sounds, because the truth is no longer something he can keep to himself. He explains what he feels, what he remembers, what he has seen inside his own mind, timelines that no longer exist, realities that were erased, lives that were lived and then removed as if they never happened. And this time, something is different. They don't believe him, but they don't dismiss him either, because something inside them recognizes the possibility, even if they cannot fully accept it. And, for a brief moment, something dangerous begins to form. Awareness. But awareness is fragile, and it is not unnoticed, because far away on Valkyris, Ethan Carwilel is not just shaping reality anymore. He is observing its reactions. He is watching for inconsistencies, for resistance, for anything that does not align with the structure he is building. And when awareness begins to emerge, even in its weakest form, it becomes a problem. Because a perfect timeline cannot contain doubt. It cannot allow contradiction. It cannot permit the possibility that something was changed. So the system adapts. The erasures evolve. They become more precise, more targeted, not just removing events, not just rewriting timelines, but eliminating the very conditions that allow awareness to exist. Thoughts that lead too far disappear before they can form. Questions dissolve before they can be asked. Conversations lose direction before they reach the truth. And slowly, one by one, the people who began to feel something begin to forget, not just what they felt, but that they ever felt it at all. The doubt fades. The hesitation disappears. The world becomes stable again, complete again, normal again, except for Kael Varyn, because he does not reset. He does not forget. He continues to see the cracks, even as they are being sealed. He continues to remember, even as memory itself is being rewritten. And that makes him something more than just a witness. It makes him a flaw, a contradiction inside a system that is trying to become perfect. And contradictions cannot exist in perfection, which means something is going to change. Because Ethan Carwilel is no longer just shaping timelines. He is beginning to notice the one thing that does not follow the rules. And once he understands it, once he identifies it, once he sees Kael Varyn not as an anomaly, but as a problem, then this will no longer be about erasing timelines. It will become something far more direct. Because the only thing more dangerous than a broken reality is someone who remembers that it was broken. And Kael Varyn is the only one left who does. The war beyond time. At this point, it is no longer just something Kael Varyn feels or remembers. It becomes something he understands, because the pattern is clear now. The erasures are not random. They are controlled, precise, intentional. And that means there is someone behind them. Someone shaping reality itself. And once that realization settles, there is no going back, because now this is not about confusion anymore. This is about conflict. But it is not a normal conflict. There are no enemies to see, no battles to fight, no places to go, because this war does not exist in space, it exists in time. And time does not give you something to stand on. It shifts beneath you. It rewrites itself. It removes the ground before you even realize you are standing on it. And that is what makes this war impossible. Because how do you fight something that can erase the moment before you act? Kael begins to move differently, not physically, but mentally. He starts paying attention to the patterns of change, the moments where reality hesitates, the small inconsistencies that appear before something disappears. And slowly, he realizes that there are gaps moments where something could still be changed before it is erased completely. Small windows, brief chances, and that is where the fight begins. Not with strength, but with timing. He starts testing it, holding on to memories longer, focusing on details, refusing to let them slip away. And for the first time, something unexpected happens, something small but undeniable. A memory doesn't disappear. It holds, just for a moment. But that moment is enough, because it proves something critical. The erasures are not instant everywhere. They spread, they propagate, and that means they can be resisted. Not stopped completely, but delayed. And delay is opportunity. Far away on Velcaris, Ethan Kael notices the shift immediately, because nothing escapes his system. Every change, every resistance, every inconsistency is visible to him. And Kael Varyn becomes something more than an anomaly. He becomes a variable, an unexpected one, a deviation from perfection, and that cannot be allowed to continue. So the system adapts again, but this time it is different because now the focus is no longer just on timelines. It is on the one who remembers them. The erasures begin to move with purpose, targeting not just events, but the connections Kael relies on. Places feel unfamiliar before he can understand them. Conversations break before they reach meaning. Memories begin to collapse faster, more aggressively, as if something is trying to close in on him. And for the first time, Kael feels it, not just the changes, but the intention behind them. This is no longer passive. This is directed. Something knows he exists, and it is responding. The war escalates instantly, because now every move matters. Every thought, every memory, every moment he holds on to becomes an act of resistance. And every time he pushes back, reality pushes harder in return, trying to correct him, trying to erase the one thing it cannot fully control. And that is when Kael understands the truth. He is not trying to stop the erasures anymore. He is part of them, because his existence is now a contradiction in the system, a memory that should not exist, a witness that should not remain. And in a universe being shaped into perfection, contradictions cannot survive. So the question changes. This is no longer about saving timelines. It is about surviving long enough to understand how to stop the one creating them. Because somewhere beyond everything Kael can see or reach, Ethan Kael is no longer just shaping reality. He is closing in, refining the system, eliminating every imperfection. And Kael Varyn is becoming the last imperfection left, which means this war is no longer invisible. It is inevitable, because when perfection is almost complete, the final step is always elimination, the final choice. At this point, Kael Varyn no longer questions what is happening, because now he understands it completely. The erasures are not random. They are not mistakes. They are not accidents. They are part of a system, a structure being shaped with purpose. And that purpose leads to one inevitable conclusion. Reality is being reduced, simplified, aligned into a single perfect timeline, and everything that does not belong is being removed. And that is when the final realization reaches him. Not suddenly, not violently, but with a quiet certainty that settles deeper than fear, deeper than doubt, because he finally sees the origin of it all, the moment where everything began, the point where time was first touched, first altered, first broken. And once he sees it, he cannot unsee it. This did not start with destruction. It started with discovery. And as long as that discovery exists, this will never stop. Because even if Ethan Kael is removed, even if this version of reality is saved, the knowledge will remain. The possibility will remain. And sooner or later, someone else will reach the same conclusion. Someone else will begin again. Someone else will break time all over again. Which means this is not about stopping Ethan Kael. It is about stopping the origin. And that changes everything. Because now the solution is clear, but it is also impossible. To end this, he must erase the moment where time manipulation was discovered. He must remove the beginning of the fracture itself. He must make it so that time is never touched, never altered, never controlled. But doing that does not fix what was lost. It removes everything that came after. Every erased timeline, every lost world, every memory he carries. Everything disappears. Not destroyed, not saved, but undone. as if it never existed at all. And that includes him. Not his body, not his existence in the simplest sense, but the version of him that remembers, the one shaped by all those lost realities, the one carrying the truth, will vanish, replaced by someone who never knew any of this, someone who lives in a perfect timeline without fractures, without memories, without meaning tied to what was lost. And for the first time, Kael hesitates, not because he fears disappearing, but because he understands the cost. If he resets everything, then every world that was erased will remain erased, not because they were destroyed, but because they will never have existed in the first place. Every life, every moment, every connection he remembers will be gone, without even the memory of being gone. And that means one thing: the universe will be perfect, but empty of everything it sacrificed to become that way. And in that moment, the choice becomes real, not between winning and losing, but between truth and perfection, between remembering everything that was lost, or creating a reality where nothing was ever lost, and no one even knows it. Because once he makes this choice, there is no going back, no second chance, no one left to remember what he chose, only the outcome. And as the structure of time continues to collapse around him, as the final timeline begins to lock into place, Kael Varyn understands something that no one else ever could. That saving the universe does not mean protecting what exists. It means deciding what deserves to exist at all. The last timeline. There is no sound, no explosion, no visible shift when it finally happens, because the end of everything does not arrive with chaos. It arrives in silence, complete and absolute. In that final moment, Kael Varyn stands at the edge of all timelines, not in a place, not in a moment, but somewhere beyond both, where every version of reality overlaps for a single impossible instant. Within him exists everything that is about to disappear, every world, every life, every memory, every fragment of existence that was erased along the way, all of it still alive only because he remembers it. And for the first time, he truly understands the weight of what he carries, because once he makes this choice, all of it will be gone. Not destroyed, not lost, but undone, as if it had never existed at all. He knows what must be done, because now the truth is clear. As long as the origin exists, as long as time can be manipulated, this cycle will never end. It will repeat again and again, in different forms, with different outcomes, but always leading back to the same collapse, the same attempt to create perfection. So the only way to stop it is not to fight it, not to resist it, but to remove it completely. For a brief instant, everything seems to slow, even here, even beyond time itself, as if reality is waiting for the decision, as if existence itself is holding its breath. And Kael Varyn does not hesitate, not because it is easy, but because he understands something deeper than fear, deeper than loss. He understands that meaning does not need to survive to matter. And so, he reaches into the origin, into the exact moment where everything began, and he erases it. Instantly, everything changes. The fractures disappear. The war never begins. Ethan Kryll never rises. Time stabilizes into a single continuous flow, perfect, seamless, untouched. The universe continues as if nothing ever happened. Civilizations grow. Stars burn. Lives unfold in quiet harmony. There is no memory, no trace, no evidence that reality was ever different. Everything is exactly as it should be. But then something feels wrong. Not in the universe, in him. Because as the new timeline settles, as his memories begin to fade, as his existence rewrites itself into someone who never lived through any of this, something resists. A fragment, a single piece that refuses to disappear. And in that fragment, a realization forms. He didn't erase the origin. He became it. Because the moment he touched it, the moment he tried to remove it, he changed it. He ensured it. He made it inevitable. And somewhere, in this perfect timeline, on a distant world where time moves faster than it should, a mind begins to notice small inconsistencies, patterns that do not align, moments that repeat, just slightly differently. Ethan Kryll, not created, not awakened, inevitable, Because now the discovery does not come from curiosity. It comes from something deeper, something that echoes across timelines, a memory that was never supposed to exist. And as reality continues forward, flawless and complete, one truth remains hidden beneath everything. This was never the end. It was always the beginning.